You're thinking about opening a commercial space or you've already signed the lease. Either way, the goal is the same. You want to open on time and you don't want to get wrecked by surprise costs. Projects typically get delayed for 3 reasons. First, big decisions happen too late. Second, you end up waiting on someone else, like in permits or the landlord. Or the space needs a lot more work than you initially thought. Then you're paying rent on a space you can't use, you're bleeding cash, and then you start thinking that your contractor is ripping you off. I run a construction company, and we've built over $3 million of clinics and offices in the past 2 years. And in this video, I'll give you the 6th step to opening day so you know what happens first, who helps you at each step, what you should walk away with, so the deliverables, and what mistake that usually makes people late. So here's your 6-step roadmap. Step 1, you want to find a space that can work for your actual business, what you actually do. Step 2, you want to lock in the lease details before you sign so you know what you're responsible for and what your landlord is responsible for. Then step 3, that's where you turn your idea into a rough initial plans so that way you can get preliminary pricing so you're not designing something you can't afford. Step 4, now that you're clear on a rough initial budget, you can move on to more detailed plans and do the permits and the construction plans. Step 5 is where you sign your bill contract plus order the materials. So that happens typically with your GC. And then step 6, you build the space and you open your doors. To keep this simple, at each step, I'll show you what you need to figure out, who can help you figure that out, what done looks like, so what deliverables you need, and what usually goes wrong at each step. So let's start with step 1. It's finding a space that can work for your business. That means more than just rent and location. You're really trying to answer one question here. Can this space actually support what I want to do here? For example, if you're opening a clinic, a medical spa, dental, or physio space, that could mean that you need to check the plumbing, accessibility, the parking, room count, and whether the building can support your equipment. And if you're opening an office, you might need to check different things. For example, layout flexibility, power and internet needs, parking, natural light, building rules. Like, can you have meetings after hours? That's important. And then if you're opening a retail or customer-facing space, that could mean frontage, signage, visibility, and customer flow. So this is usually where a tenant rep broker can help you. Since they know the market, they'll help you filter out bad options early on and help you focus on the spaces that will actually make sense for your business. So by the end of this step, what you want is a short list of spaces that could actually work for your business needs. And typically, what usually goes wrong here is simple. People tend to fall in love with the address, the rent, or the look of the space before they even know whether or not it'll work for their business. And when that happens, the pen usually shows up later, like in layout changes and extra work, extra cost, lost time, and even permit delays. Okay, so now we're moving on to step 2. This is where you figure out what you're really responsible for before you sign your lease. Step 2 is where you figure out what you're really responsible for before you sign. Because liking your space is not enough. You need to understand the deal. What are you responsible for? What is the landlord responsible for? So this is usually where your broker or your real estate lawyer matter most. And depending on the project, it can also help to get early input from a general contractor, an architect, an engineer, a designer before the lease gets finalized. They'll help you spot like MEP issues like mechanical, plumbing, electrical. And at this point, you're trying to get clear on a few simple things, like who pays for what the landlord is responsible for, what are you responsible for, and who has to say yes before the work can start. And that last saying yes part is extremely, extremely, extremely important. Because for example, let's say you sign a lease with a landlord and you think that you can start construction right away. And then you find out that the landlord has to review your layout, approve the work, or approve your signage. Now you've lost 3 weeks and you haven't even started construction. So that's why this step is crucial. That's why this step matters so much. When this step is done right, you should be able to say, this is what the landlord is doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what still needs to be approved, and this is what could slow me down. For example, let's say the electrical needs aren't enough, then you need to install a transformer, or plumbing, you'll need to move a bunch of plumbing around. So this is why this step is crucial, and this is why it matters so much. And when you've done it right, you should be able to say this. This is what the landlord is doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what still needs to be approved, and this is what can slow me down. For example, electrical, you might need to install a transformer. Or plumbing, you might need to move a lot of plumbing around, so that could take time. So the big mistake here is signing the lease before the bill responsibilities are clear. Then step 3 is where you stop guessing and you turn your idea into something real. So step 3 is where the project stops being an idea in your head and start becoming something real. At this stage, you need someone who can help you turn this idea into three things: a rough layout, a budget range, and a timeline range. So this might be done by a design build general contractor like Chromeblock, or it might also be done by an architect or a designer who can give you a realistic early budget range. So what matters here is that you leave this step with numbers and a direction you can actually make decisions from. So this is also where you start seeing the real risks. Maybe the electrical is not enough. Maybe the plumbing is not where you need it to be. Maybe the layout you want costs way more than you expected. Maybe the space needs a lot more work than you initially thought. And this is the step people underestimate the most. And if you skip it, you can spend weeks and thousands of dollars designing something you can't afford. Then you have to redesign, you lose time, you cut scope, your opening date starts slipping, and your budget starts moving. And at this point, you need a team that can actually turn your idea into a rough plan and give you a rough budget. How much is this space going to roughly cost? Is it going to cost $200 a foot, or maybe $250 a foot, or maybe $300 a foot? You need a rough budget at this step so that you're not designing something you can't afford. So this is why this step is very crucial. When it's done right, you should be able to say, this is what the landlord is doing, this is what I am doing, this is what still needs to be improved. And you could also know what could slow you down. For example, is the electrical capacity enough? Is the plumbing correct? So this is very, very important. So the mistake here is starting real design before you have those early numbers. And if you want help doing that for your own project, that's also what we do at Chromeblock. So if you're in the Montreal area or the surrounding areas, you can reach us through the link in the description below. Now moving on to step 4, getting these plans approved. So step 4 is where you turn your idea into an actual real plan that people can build from and that the city can approve. This is where a lot of projects slow down because the plans can look done while still leaving tons of questions unanswered. Questions like, where exactly does the sink go? How many lights go in this room? What size is the door? What kind of flooring goes here? Where do the plugs go? Where does the data line go? And so on. If those details are still fuzzy, the people pricing the job will start guessing, and the people reviewing the plans will start asking you questions, and that's how you slow the whole process down. And what I mean by people pricing the job will start guessing, like the general contractors, let's say you're interviewing 3 different general contractors. How do you compare the quotes if they're not building from the same plans? For example, if they're not putting the same lights in, if they're not putting the same toilets in, like a toilet can range from $160 to $1,000, $2,000. Like how can you compare the quotes if you don't know what's included? Like if the plans aren't clear and if the different general contractors are making different assumptions. That's why you need detailed plans, and that's why this step is extremely important. And to help you create these plans, that's where your architects, engineers, and designers come in. And if you're working with a design build general contractor like Chromeblock, then we'll manage that process with them. So what you want at the end of this step is simple. First, you want plans that have been approved by the city and your landlord. And second, you want plans that are detailed enough for construction. And here's what usually goes wrong at this step. People think the plans are complete because they look good, but basic build questions are still missing. Then revisions start, pricing changes, ordering gets delayed, and the opening date starts moving again. So the mistake here is approving plans that still leave too many basic questions unanswered. Now we're ready to move on to step 5. So step 5 is signing the build contract and ordering the materials. At this point, the big goal is simple. You want to lock in the build, identify what takes times, and get those items moving early. This is where your GC takes the lead. And you still matter here a lot because decisions and approval still needs to happen fast. So what are you trying to leave with at the end of the step? You want a signed contract, a clear list of what needs to be ordered early, and real delivery dates. Because some items takes longer than people expect. For example, doors and frame, custom millwork, specialty finishes, lights, fixtures, equipment, anything custom takes a long time. And if those items are ordered late, they will arrive late. That creates one of the most frustrating delays in the whole process. The space looks almost finished, like the paint is done, your floors are in, but your doors are not there, or the millwork is missing, or one key item has not arrived. So now your job is almost done, but you still can't open. That's what this step is trying to prevent. The mistake here is starting the build without the critical materials ordered and confirmed. We're also putting together an opening day roadmap PDF based on this video, so you can follow the whole process step by step. That will be linked in the description below. Now we move on to step 6. Step 6 is building the space and opening your doors. This is a step everyone thinks about when they think about construction. But the real finish line is not the space looks done. The real finish line is you can actually open and operate. This is usually where your general contractor leads the process, and the supporting people can include you, your operations teams, your IT people, your furniture vendor, your equipment vendor, and anyone else needed to make the space actually work on day one. So what does done look like here? Well, the construction is done, your final inspections are passed, and you're actually ready to move in. And when I say ready, I mean ready for real life. That means you have your internet, phones, access control, security, furniture, equipment. Because a lot of spaces look finished before they're actually ready to open. That's why people get burned in the end. What usually goes wrong here is that people focus so much on the construction that they leave all the non-construction stuff for later. Then their opening weeks turns into chaos. The mistake here is leaving IT, furniture, equipment, and moving details to the end. So now a quick recap. We said there's 6 steps. So step 1, you need to find a space that can work for your business. Step 2, you need to lock in the lease details before you sign. Step 3 is where you turn your idea into a rough initial plan. Step 4 is where you get more details into that plan and you get them approved by the relevant authorities. Step 4 is where you get more details into those plans and you get them approved and they're ready to be built. Step 5 is where you sign your build contract and you order your materials. Step 6 is where you build the space and open your doors. And remember, projects typically get delayed for 3 reasons. First, big decisions happen too late. Second, you end up waiting on someone else. Or third, the space needs a lot more work than you initially thought. If you want the opening day roadmap PDF, it will be linked below. And if you want to go deeper into what the people involved in this process do, we'll have a podcast playlist linked below. So it'll be like brokers, lawyers, architects, engineers, general contractors. And now the next question is, how do you get those early budget you can actually trust? That's what the next video is about.